right, Joella.
Yeah.
It's getting about that time, right? We have to start talking about fall.
Fall.
How about that?
Yeah, after this hot summer, it's going
it's
to
been a hot
be
summer.
good to have some cooler temperatures.
Yes.
And football season,
Yeah.
start thinking
Yeah.
about time to get everything ready for the winter.
How about that? So you're going to give us some
We're going to
tips?
talk about
Okay.
a few things.
Good deal.
And, it's still time to plant annuals. You've got parties going on, and there are still some annuals that you can plant. Well, mums, of
Yeah,
course,
I like mums.
Those are very popular this time of year. Cabbage and kales, pansies, Dusty Miller. Celosia is one that also looks very good in the fall. You can also plant vegetables, the cool season crops. Beets, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, all the onions, some lettuces, all the cool season crops.
Okay.
They used to have a slogan, fall is the time for planting, because the soil is warm and you can plant shrubs and perennials in the ground, and since the ground is still warm, the roots will start establishing before it gets cold, and then they'll be ahead of a spring planted shrub or perennial.
Okay.
So fall is the time for planting.
Okay. Like that.
Oh, soil pH. Now, we always say it's time, don't guess, soil test.
That's right.
So, and that's true. Fall is a perfect time of year to do that, because when you're going to amend the soils with either, if the test comes back and says, well, you need to add some acid to your soil because your pH is too high, so you add some type of sulfur to the soil to make it more acidic. And what if it comes back acidic and it needs to be more basic? Well, then it maybe need lime. So, but when you do that, it will take several months to change the pH in the soil. What better time than over winter when you don't have to worry about it? So in the spring, you're ready to go.
You're ready to go.
I've had a hydrangea that I have tried and been putting acid on to get a beautiful blue color, and I finally got it this year. So it's the only one of 3. So now I've got to do the same thing to the other 2. So I'll be adding some more acid to the soil this fall for them.
Okay.
And a lot of people lime their vegetable gardens or their lawns. So it's a perfect time to do that.
I would agree.
And speaking of lawns, the things you need to do to your lawn, if you have cool season grasses, it's a perfect time of year to plant seed.
Okay.
Because they like 60 to 65 degree temperatures at night to be able to germinate. So that's your fescues and your bluegrasses.
Okay.
And because it's an active time of year for these lawns to be growing, you could actually core and put amendments in your lawns for those particular varieties.
Okay.
Warm season grasses like Bermudas and Zoysias, Mahalia, St. Augustine, don't do any of the coring or anything like that, but you could add a fall fertilizer to them if you wanted to. But it's also time to overseed those. If you want a green lawn, you have Bermuda, you want a green lawn, you overseed it with perennial rye,
Right.
and then you'll have green grass all winter.
Sure will.
So it's the perfect time to do all of that.
Yeah, I'd rather mine go dormant,
A lot of people,
'cause I want to go dormant.
a lot of people are tired and they don't want to keep mowing.
Yeah.
But with the soil pH test too, you can improve your soils. I created a new garden spot this year, and I had garden mix added to it. Well, they didn't have any more, so they had just mixed it for me.
Okay.
Well, the pH was all off in it, and so it would draw the nitrogen out of the soil to try to do the decomposition for the soil mix, and so my garden didn't do as well. Well, if I put more amendments in it this time, I would do it in the fall, so that by the time spring is around, it will have done all that decomposing and it will be ready for me to plant and do a lot better. So improve your soils this time of year. Cleanup.
Yeah.
I mean, you can cut perennial seed heads down, but it's a nice time to collect seeds from your perennials or your annuals, whatever you want. It's a great time. When they start going to seed, pick them up, put them in envelopes and put them inside in a cool place to use next spring.
Okay.
Clean up your vegetable garden when they start dying. Don't let them just go ahead and die in the garden. pull them up when they're done producing, and put them either, if they're diseased or have bugs, don't put them in the compost pile, simply throw them away. But you do want to clear everything out of the garden. You don't want to leave anything there in case diseases or bugs overwinter there.
That's right.
Corn stalks, you've got corn stalks left, make some Photoshocks and some fall coloring, you know, for some fall decorations with your mums, and maybe you grew pumpkins or gourds. Yeah. You know, you can harvest and use it as decorations for your yard. And of course, fall is also for planting spring blooming bulbs.
Hey.
Your tulips,
Yeah.
your daffodils,
Right.
your hyacinths, crocus, all of that. And when you plant them now, then they'll get the cold time that they need to initiate their blooms. All the bulbs need a cool season to initiate blooms for the spring, so there'll be plenty of time for that.
Plenty of time. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And of course, you've got those beautiful tropical plants outside that you've been enjoying them on your porch.
Right.
Well, you better bring them in, especially
them
before
in.
that first frost. Make sure they don't have any bugs or diseases
Yeah.
on them. You know, wash them off. I like to wash them off.
Yeah.
If I've planted them in the ground, I like to dig them up.
Okay.
And sometimes I don't bring them in. I have a place in my garage where I try to keep them and have pretty good success with keeping some of them in the garage over winter. But if they're outside and you want them inside your house, you just got to make room for them. You might have to trim them a little bit. Just remember they're going to lose leaves because it's not as high light intensities
Right.
inside as it is outside. And you might want to just make sure, some people will soak their whole container in a bucket of water, so if there's any insects in the soil, it'll come up to the
okay.
top, and then you don't
Smart.
bring them inside, and that way you don't have to use insecticides.
Okay. Now, what about watering? You know, those plants when you bring them indoors, do you need to wait till the soil?
Once you bring them inside, don't water them as much because
Right.
they don't have the atmosphere, the same environment that they had outside. So
good.
watch your watering once you bring them in.
Okay, good.
And speaking of water, you know, sometimes we've had droughts in the fall, and then we'll get a frost, and then people's plants die. I remember one December, we still had not had a frost here, and so I was outside watering because I had heard we were going to have a hard freeze the next night, and the crepe myrtle still had leaves all on them. So I'm out there, you know, it's 4:30, it gets dark, so I'm out there watering in the dark my plants, and I think my neighbors thought I was crazy. But you know, I didn't lose any of my plants because they had enough water to be able to withstand the
Got
freeze
it.
that they got.
Got it.
So even in a drought situation, just be careful, watch the weather. And if we're having a drought in the fall and we're going to get a hard freeze, it's always good to water so that the plant has plenty of water in the system so they can take the cold.
Okay, good point. Okay. Yeah, because I wouldn't have thought of that. Yeah, that's good. Okay.
And of course, the last thing you need to do, you got to bring the hose inside.
you
you got to
gotta
bring
do
the
that,
tools.
right, right.
You know, drain your hoses. Make sure all of your sprinklers are drained because if you set them up, you'll notice that sometimes your water leaks out of them. And so you just make sure everything's drained. You got to put your cushions up and your hammocks. And for fall, if you have hummingbirds, make sure the hummingbirds have food for migrating south. And if you're going to get a freeze that night, at least bring in the hummingbird feeder for that particular night before you put it back out for the hummingbirds that are flying south.
Another
and
good
of course,
point. Another good point.
And of course, if you want to, you can look in your extension office and find out when they migrate through your area, so you know when to stop feeding, so they continue on their way south.
That was good, Joe. I appreciate that. So these are some of the things you do.
I do them
as well
every
in
year.
your own garden. So good
Yeah.
deal. Well, thank you much for the information. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. To find out more information on this topic, just click on the familyplotgarden.com link in the description.